the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She's a best-selling author as well as financial educator and the author of the book The Student's Guide to Financial Freedom, none other than Dr. Paris Woods.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Dr. Paris on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself and that podcast?
Yeah, no, thank you for introducing the new book, The Student's Guide to Financial Freedom. Is a student adaptation of my first best-selling book, The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom. And it really covers a lot of the topics that I wish someone had told me much earlier on, before I made so many mistakes in adulthood. And so it feels like a gift sort of back to my younger self. And I sincerely hope the next generation is able to get copies of the book, get the information, and live a much richer and fuller life as a result.
Richer and fuller life. We love that, Dr. Paris, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Here on Abstract Essay, we celebrate you with my cheering squad. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, let's talk about the book itself, or being a best-selling author as well as a financial educator. You've spent over 2 decades working in education, watching brilliant students lose ground. What's most painful example you've seen of a capable student making a financial mistake that could have been prevented with information they just never received?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, there's a long list of these. One of the ones that stands out to me is a young lady who bought a brand new Acura, like a luxury
Ah,
vehicle,
mm,
freshman year in college. She needed a car. You know, we live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I totally get that. But unfortunately, she went to a car dealership and just bought a brand new vehicle. And at the time, it was a $700 monthly payment. Now, this was
mm,
years ago, so imagine what that monthly payment would look like today. And, this is someone who was a full time student working a minimum wage job. So, not only thinking about sort of how much of time and labor it was going to take for her to afford that payment, but cars are such a terrible investment. It's such a terrible place to put our money. And so for her to have that kind of loan for $700 a month, if she were putting that, into an index fund, by the time she made it to my age today, she'd be pretty wealthy as opposed to having nothing to show for it, putting it toward a car payment. So I think that's a really great example. But as soon as you turn 18, it's so easy to open a credit card, to take on student loans, to go to a dealership. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes young people make is taking on debt unnecessarily and then having to spend so much of their adulthood paying it back.
well said, Dr. Paris. You say students graduate with debt they don't understand, take jobs and underpay them, and miss the wealth building window. Which is of these three in the hardest to recover from it? You miss it in your 20s.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. Especially, when you talk about this wealth building window, the greatest asset we have on our side is time. So while you're young, even before age 20, you can start investing, and just tiny, tiny amounts can grow to really massive numbers by the time you're in your 30s or 40s. Unfortunately, most of us don't think about investing until 30, 40, where we start to worry,
Yes.
have we saved enough for retirement, and we've missed out on decades of growth. So I really do think that, switching around this equation and saying, instead of taking on debt, why don't we work on saving and investing at those young ages will have such a huge impact on how young people, lives turn out as they grow up.
Mm. And Dr. Paris, correct me if I'm wrong, your first book sold over 120,000 copies and specifically served black women and girls. Why is it important to write a book with a specific audience in mind rather than universal financial guide?
Yeah, that first book really was sort of born of my own experiences, going to Harvard twice,
Mm.
getting, this job in education and being so excited about my career. And then, at around age 30, having this wake up call that unfortunately, even though I did everything right, because of the financial choices that I had been making, my life, I really didn't feel very free financially and really felt like so much of my paycheck was getting eaten up with these debt payments. And, my first reaction was, well, maybe I should have gone into a different career. Maybe I just need more money. And, now I'm older and wiser. I say, well, actually, I could have done better with the money that I had and could have been enjoying financial freedom then as I am now. Sort of got to learn from those lessons and apply them. But that first book, came out of the lessons that I learned from that experience, the different choices that I started making. And then by the time the pandemic hit, I got laid off from my job. And because of the positive and smart decisions I had been making, the layoff wasn't a negative experience. It actually became an opportunity to travel, to write a book, to finish my doctorate. Um, and also to sort of spread the gospel about like early retirement and ways that investing can create freedom, like true freedom where you're not relying on your job. So if you got laid off, you were only there because you wanted to be and not because you needed that paycheck. And that last piece, the financial independence, retire early, sort of fire movement piece, was something that I had been becoming increasingly interested in. And unfortunately, whenever I talk to other Black women, folks had never heard of this. They never heard of this concept of early retirement. So I thought, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to share my experiences. I'm going to talk about all the things that went wrong, talk about how I turned it around. And then by the end, I'm going to introduce people to this concept of early retirement and bring this information to my community. So that's why it's called The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom and why I really wanted to write something personal and reflective of my experience, but also to invite my community into this really important conversation.
Beautifully articulated, Dr. Paris. You've watched first generation and low income students lose ground not because they lack ability, but because no one taught them how money works. Why financial literacy is still not treated as a core life skill alongside needing a math in most schools.
I know. I mean, I will say we're in a moment where this is starting to change. At least 30 US states now have financial literacy as a requirement. And so more and more students will be taking a class with financial literacy on the title. And so, part of what I'm up to, we're releasing this book, The Student's Guide to Financial Freedom, as a resource that could go along with any financial literacy curriculum. But my challenge to folks creating curriculum and to teachers teaching this content is to go beyond the basics. Like it's one thing to know how to write a check or how to open a checking account and you can cover all the boring basics, right, of how money works. But I think it'd be much more interesting and compelling if we taught young people how to use money as a tool to create the life that they want to have. And so for me, that's thinking beyond financial literacy to financial freedom. So all the workshops and the curriculum that we're creating really emphasizes this, really emphasizes how money becomes a tool to increase your sense of agency and sense of choice. And I hope, for all of us who've made mistakes in adulthood with money, that we feel compelled and perhaps are the motivation for bringing this kind of information to students even younger. And we can sort of leverage this place that we're in policy wise to make sure that the courses are teaching what young people actually want to know and that they'll remember it, make it sticky, make it interesting, make it engaging, so that by the time they turn 18 and start making these choices, they actually make smarter ones.
Dr. Paris, you are Harvard educated social entrepreneur with a doctorate from UT Austin. What financial lesson did you have to learn the hard way despite all the education?
I mean, a big one is the value of education and making sure we're going to get a return on what we're investing, right? So at 18, it's easy to think to, doesn't matter the price tag. I will go to the school, I'll just take it out in loans. I was very lucky. I went to Harvard for undergrad, and because I came from a low income family, I didn't have to pay. So Harvard was completely free at that time for families that made under $40,000. Nowadays, I think it's free for families making under $200,000, right? So I had the good fortune of a free college degree. And then a year after I graduated, I ended up going right back and doing my master's degree at Harvard. And that was not free. And so I ended up taking out around $60,000 in loans. That was the mistake. That's something I learned the hard way. And it didn't even occur to me to either work and pay, while I was going, or later, afterward, I went back and worked at Harvard. So I could have gotten like employee tuition discounts. There's so many creative ways to avoid taking on loans, taking on debt for school. So by the time I turned 30 and realized I had to get out of debt, I was staring at these thousands and thousands of dollars in student loans. And so I learned my lesson. And so that by the time I was ready to do my doctorate, I said, either I'm going to go to a free program or I'm going to choose a school that I can afford to pay for in cash. And I found the University of Texas at Austin, which is an excellent public university. They had a really exciting program. It was sort of a social justice oriented doctorate in higher education leadership. And I could afford to pay for my full time job. So I stayed working and then I paid cash. Smartest decision I ever could have made, especially like something changes when you're paying cash for your degree, right? So all of a sudden I'm like, okay, what am I getting for the money I'm paying here? I'm paying attention. And for a doctorate, some people stay in school for years and years. And I said, nope, I'm paying every semester. So we're going to get this thing done. And so it was good motivation to get my degree completed. So that was a lesson I learned the hard way. And I'm glad I figured it out in the end. And I didn't have any additional student loans as I wrapped up my education.
Beautifully articulated, Dr. Paris. You say information often comes too late or not at all. What is a financial decision teenagers make that permanently impact their wealth trajectory and they don't even know it at that time?
Yeah. I mean, a big one, is the way our mindset is shaped
Mm,
around the purpose of money. So for most of us, we start bringing in money, even below working age, right? Maybe it's an allowance or just you start making money. And the first thing you think is, well, what can I buy with this money, right? So in our mind, money, the purpose of money is to purchase things. It's like this form of exchange. And, I think at that age, it would be great to sort of insert a different way to think about money, which is about growth and about the power of putting at least a little bit of money aside and watching it grow over time, right? So the first way we think about getting money is working. So I'm going to trade an hour of my time and then you're going to give me some money in exchange for that hour. And then what we learn over time is that there's actually a limit to how much money you can make. And maybe you start to charge more for your time. But the equation, I think the real secret, if you want to build wealth, is learning how to have money grow without your labor, right? So divorcing labor from growth. And the way we do that is through saving and investing. So when you're young, my advice, I know we may not be ready to invest. My advice would be to start to practice at least taking a percentage of the money you're bringing in and saving it. I think that's one of the greatest habits we can build, knowing that every dollar that comes in doesn't have to go right back out. And then over time, we can start to add more sophistication to that. Okay, instead of saving it in a piggy bank, why don't we put it in a high yield savings account and watch your interest payments start to come? Or at some point, why don't we open a Roth IRA, right? And we can look at some investment calculators and start to see over long periods of time how much small amounts of money will grow. So that's the habit that we have to start building as young as possible.
Well said, Dr. Paris. Financial advice written for general audiences often assumes a certain starting point. What's different about financial freedom for Black women specifically that general advice misses?
It's unfortunate that we often assume that you either have to be rich to build wealth, or for the when we think about Black women specifically, there tend to be sort of disadvantages that can accumulate. So not only are Black women more likely to be in student loan debt, but Black women are also more likely to be underpaid, and so it's going to take longer to get out of that debt, less likely to be investing in the stock market. This is true for women. And so these sort of barriers, they tend to accumulate, right? So I think it's helpful to make this information as accessible and as simple as possible. And all the strategies that I talk about in my book are ones that anyone can do. So there are specialized, unique, thing. You can invest in real estate and you can start a business and you can sort of do a lot of specialized strategies if you're interested in that, right? If it's something that you want to study and want to understand how to run the analysis and all of that. But most of us, most humans don't want to work in finance, right? Most of us have other things we're interested in. I want to host a podcast. I want to write a book. I want to be an artist. I want to do whatever it is that you want to do in your life. People like that need financial strategies too. And the good news is that there are very simple strategies anyone can do that will put you on the path to building wealth. And that's what I teach. So we talk about turning your skills into income so you do work that you enjoy. We talk about setting up automatic systems so your money goes where you want it to go without you having to constantly make decisions. And then we talk about putting money into long-term investments, tax advantage accounts like the Roth IRA I mentioned, index funds, which track the whole market instead of trying to individually pick stocks, and then letting that money accumulate over long periods of time. So that's the entire financial system that I write about. And it's one that anybody can implement and anyone can benefit from. And that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, I go to these conferences all the time, the people who've retired early, retired in their 30s. And this is exactly what they did. They didn't do anything special. They didn't do anything extra. They did exactly what I teach in the Student's Guide to Financial Freedom and in the Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom.
Dr. Paris, you've worked at the intersection of education and economic mobility for 2 decades. How has the intersection changed since you started, and what was the stayed frustratingly the same?
So much has changed. I mean, 20 years, it feels like time flies, but I will tell you, when I was first starting out, we thought of college as a cure-all. So if we could just get more kids to go to college, that's going to be the cure. That's going to result in economic mobility. And, I think over time we started to realize that college is not a great destination. It's not the end point. It's just the beginning of a longer journey to getting young people into a career and onto a career path that they enjoy and that also is going to raise their prospects. So we started hearing the career go from college access to college and career access, right? And so, nowadays, and especially me having done this for a couple decades, I've gotten to watch young people grow up and, become adults and get married and have kids and all of this and do so much of the stuff that we told them to do, right? They went to college, they tried to navigate the job market. And what I realized was a gap is the financial literacy piece. So whether you complete college or not, there are going to be financial implications. Whether you get to a job that pays you what you're worth or you're underemployed, there are financial implications. And regardless of where you wind up, and I do want you to go to the best school that you can. I want you to finish. I want you to get the best job you can. I want you to love it. We have to talk about what to do with that money when you get it. And what you do with the money makes all the difference in terms of the lifestyle you're going to enjoy and how much freedom you have access to. So I think it's time we add the financial piece to the field and to the work. And that's what I'm up to. That's the mission that I'm on today.
You talk about financial freedom rather than getting rich or retirement. How do you define financial freedom for someone who may never earn a six-figure income?
Thank you for drawing the distinction too, because financial freedom for me is not the same as getting rich, right? And part of it is shifting your mindset on the goal. So if money is the goal, and I've seen people for whom this is true, and they went into a job specifically because of how much money it made, and they have been on this hamster wheel of making more and more money. And the trick is that if money is the goal, you will never have enough. There's always a next benchmark. There's always another person who has more money than you. And so it's dissatisfying. Like I know friends who have made hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they wish they made the million. And I know
Mhm.
friends who are like corporate CEOs of national companies making millions of dollars, but they want to be the billionaire, right? So it's literally insatiable. You will never be happy if money is the goal. So what I propose and what I think is much more fulfilling is having a meaningful life, right? So financial freedom to me is having the freedom of labor and time in order to design a life that you love. And money is just a tool to enable that, right? So when having a meaningful life is the goal, all of a sudden you're able to draw a line between more and enough when it comes to money. And it gives you a greater sense of peace. You start to realize that material possessions aren't the end all be all to happiness. So often we buy something really awesome and then, you kind of get bored of it. You're like, I got the thing a week later. All right. Right. And so we start to realize the material isn't what's going to result in your happiness. And you can enjoy a meaningful, safe life without earning six figures. Like that becomes true and that becomes much more accessible, so folks can actually start to enjoy their life and not be stuck on these goals that may or may not be attainable when it comes to earnings or even achieving the status of being a millionaire or being a billionaire, right? There are other more important things to focus on in life.
Well done, Dr. Paris. But before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and of course, my book 101 review in sixth season too, comedy 101 of fourth season, and my movie 101, my food 101 are in sixth season as well. Geography 101 love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 are in fifth season, science 101, sex 101 in fourth season, trivia 101, motivation 101, spiritual awakening 101, entrepreneurship 101, law 101, mental health 101, coaching 101, and of course, my Bible verses 101 are my baby podcasts. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Dr. Paris, a parent listening wants their teenager to be financially literature or literate, I should say, but doesn't feel qualified to teach it themselves. What the first thing they should do this week that does not require them to be an expert?
I mean, the first thing is to buy the Student's Guide to Financial Freedom. And the reason why I mentioned the book, I wrote this book so that it could be a discussion tool for parents and students to use together. So at the end of every chapter, there are a set of reflection questions. And these are great ones for a parent or a caregiver or an aunt or anyone to have with a young person who's just read the chapter to say, okay, what do you think about what you just read? What choices might you want to make? And what I would really challenge adults to do, whether they use this book or not, is to start to be more transparent about our own money. Money can be so taboo. We don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about the mistakes we personally made enough. I think young people are just eager for truth. They want to know what's really going on in your life. I would say tell them the truth. Tell them things you wish you'd done differently and invite them to make informed choices in their own lives as a result. And I think you might be on mute.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Paris. Very well said. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your projects, or anything you want to promote on Abstract Essay?
Yeah, I would say follow me on social media at author Paris Woods. And check out the books. ParisWoods.com has more information on both books and how you can connect with me if you want to work on any of these other projects, curriculum, speaking. I really want to help you be successful. So definitely reach out.
Yes, people reach out and connect with Dr. Paris. And I have one more question before I will let you go. A student is listening who is about to make a decision about college loans, their first job, or moving out on their own. What is the one question they ask themselves before signing anything?
Pause. I would definitely pause and say, is there any way for me to afford this thing without taking on debt? And with just a little creativity or a quick little chat GPT Claude search, I guarantee you there are alternatives to using debt to pay for that thing.
Well done, Dr. Paris, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Monica, people, see you soon.